The people who save your soul never look powerful at first. The February wind cut through my coat like tiny knives as I stepped out the back door of Romano's diner with a paper bag pressed against my chest. The alley behind the restaurant smelled like grease, rainwater, and old bricks soaked from 3 straight days of storms. My sneakers splashed through puddles while neon reflections trembled across the wet pavement. Midnight in Brooklyn always felt lonely in winter. Especially when your bank account had $11 left in it. I tightened my grip on the bag and glanced down at my daughter beside me. Lily looked so small wrapped in her oversized pink coat that used to belong to the neighbor's kid upstairs. Her tiny fingers clung to mine, cold even through the gloves I'd bought from a discount bin at CVS. "Mommy, are we eating in the car again?" she whispered softly. Her voice carried that careful tone children develop when they already understand money problems before they're old enough to spell the word rent. I forced a smile. "Adventure dinner tonight, baby." She smiled back anyway because 6-year-olds still believe exhausted mothers can turn struggle into magic if they say it sweetly enough. The paper bag in my arms held leftover soup, 2 grilled cheese sandwiches, and fries the kitchen manager would have thrown away at closing. My dinner. Lily's dinner. Tomorrow's lunch if we stretched it carefully enough. I unlocked my old Honda Civic parked under the flickering streetlight when I noticed movement near the alley entrance. 2 figures stood huddled beneath the awning of the closed pharmacy across the street. Elderly. Shivering. The woman leaned against the man while snow-like rain drifted through the freezing air. Something about them made my chest tighten instantly. Maybe it was the way the older woman kept rubbing her hands together like she couldn't feel her fingers anymore. Or maybe it was because the man was trying so hard to pretend he wasn't weak. Lily saw them too. "Mommy," she whispered, tugging my sleeve. "They're cold." I closed my eyes for half a second because compassion feels expensive when you're already drowning. Then I looked down at the paper bag in my hands. 3 meals if we were careful. 1 meal if we weren't. My stomach twisted hard enough to hurt. The older man noticed me staring and immediately straightened. Pride flashed across his face so quickly it almost broke my heart. "We're fine," he called out before I even asked. His voice carried traces of wealth underneath the exhaustion. Educated. Controlled. Different from the streets around us. The woman beside him coughed into her sleeve. Not dramatic. Worse. The kind of cough that sounded tired. Lily squeezed my hand harder. "Please," she whispered. "God. Kids make mercy sound simple." I looked at the tiny apartment key in my hand. 5th floor walk up. Broken heater half the week. 1 couch. But it was warm enough to survive the night. I swallowed hard and walked toward them before common sense could stop me. "I have hot soup," I said quietly. "And my apartment's only a few blocks away." The old man's jaw tightened instantly. Suspicion. Pride. Fear. But the woman looked at me with watery blue eyes that reminded me painfully of my mother before cancer took her. "We don't want charity," the man replied. "It's not charity," I said softly. "It's just dinner." For a moment nobody moved. Rain tapped softly against the pharmacy awning while traffic hissed somewhere beyond the alley. Then Lily stepped forward holding half of her sandwich with both tiny hands. "You can have mine," she said. The old woman covered her mouth immediately like she might cry. And something shifted in the old man's face right then. Something heavy. Something ashamed. He looked away first. "Arthur," the woman whispered gently, touching his arm. He exhaled slowly through his nose before nodding once. Defeated. Tired. Human. I didn't know it yet, but that small moment standing in freezing rain beside my rusty Honda was about to destroy the life I'd spent years trying to survive. Because 3 black SUVs were already turning onto the street behind us. And inside the first one sat a man powerful enough to make an entire city afraid of his silence. The black SUVs moved slowly through the rain like sharks circling blood in dark water. Their headlights washed across the cracked brick buildings lining the street, turning the puddles silver for half a second before darkness swallowed them again. I froze beside my car with the paper bag still pressed against my chest while Lily instinctively wrapped both arms around my leg. Every survival instinct I had screamed at me to leave. Fast. But the older woman beside me suddenly whispered something under her breath. "Oh no." Her voice trembled in a way that had nothing to do with the cold anymore. The first SUV stopped directly in front of us. Then the second. Then the third. Expensive engines purred softly beneath the rain while tinted windows reflected the pharmacy lights. Nobody moved at first. The entire street felt suspended in silence. Even the traffic noise seemed farther away suddenly. Then the back door of the middle SUV opened. A man stepped out wearing a charcoal overcoat darkened by rain across the shoulders. Tall. Broad. Controlled in the terrifying way expensive men usually are. His polished shoes splashed through icy water as if he did not even notice the weather. He looked younger than I expected. Maybe mid-30s. Dark hair slicked back neatly. Sharp cheekbones. A face built for magazine covers if not for the coldness in his eyes. Those eyes landed on the elderly couple instantly. Relief flickered across his expression so quickly I almost missed it. Then it vanished beneath something harder. "Mother." His voice was calm. Too calm. The older woman stepped back slightly beside me. The old man straightened again, protective despite his shaking hands. "Ethan," he said quietly. So this was their son. My stomach tightened immediately. Not because he looked dangerous. Because everyone around him acted afraid of him. For more men stepped from the SUVs wearing dark suits beneath long coats. Security maybe. Drivers. I did not know. But none of them spoke. None of them even looked directly at Ethan for more than a second. That kind of silence only exists around powerful people. Ethan Blackwood stopped a few feet away from us, rain dripping slowly from the collar of his coat. His gaze shifted toward me next. Then Lily. Then the paper bag in my arms. He studied everything without saying a word. Like he was building a puzzle in his head. Lily buried her face against my leg. I could feel her tiny heartbeat through her coat. "You disappeared for 6 hours," Ethan finally said, his eyes still on his parents. "The entire city has been searching for you." Arthur's jaw tightened. "We did not ask to be searched for." Ethan ignored that completely. His attention returned to me again. Sharp. Careful. Assessing. "Who are you?" I swallowed hard. "Clara Bennett." "Did you approach them?" The question came instantly. Cold. Direct. Like an interrogation disguised as conversation. Heat rushed into my face despite the freezing rain. They looked cold. One of the men behind Ethan shifted slightly, exchanging a glance with another guard. Ethan did not react. He kept staring at me with those unreadable gray eyes. "And you decided to bring strangers home?" I almost laughed at the accusation buried inside that sentence. "Because my apartment barely counted as a home lately. I decided to offer soup," I replied quietly. "There is a difference." For the first time something changed in his expression. Not softness. Worse. Surprise. Like nobody had spoken to him honestly in a very long time. Arthur suddenly stepped forward beside me. "She fed us when nobody else stopped." Ethan looked at his father slowly. Then at the sandwich still clutched in Lily's tiny hand. Rain tapped softly against the SUVs while the city breathed around us in distant sirens and wet tires. Finally Ethan exhaled once through his nose before pulling off his leather gloves. "You and your daughter are coming with us," he said calmly. My heart dropped instantly. Excuse me. His eyes met mine again. Cold. Controlled. Impossible to read. Anybody willing to approach my family tonight is either very kind, he said quietly, or very dangerous. I have not decided which one you are yet. People think fear is loud. It is not. Real fear sounds like expensive car doors closing softly behind you while strangers wait for your answer in complete silence. I tightened my hand around Lily's shoulder instinctively while cold rain slid down the back of my neck. We are not going anywhere, I said carefully. Ethan Blackwood did not blink. The men behind him remained perfectly still beneath the streetlights, their dark coats dripping water onto the pavement. Arthur looked exhausted beside me now, like the argument inside him had finally burned out. Margaret touched her son's arm gently. Ethan, please. The child is freezing. His eyes shifted toward Lily again. Her cheeks were pink from the cold, strands of blonde hair stuck to her forehead beneath the hood of her coat. She looked up at him with the kind of innocent curiosity only children still possess around dangerous men. Your grandma is cold too, Lily said softly. One of the guards glanced downward immediately like he was hiding a reaction. Ethan stayed expressionless for another second before speaking quietly. Get in the car. The tone changed. Less threat. More command. I should have refused. Every lesson life taught me about survival screamed not to trust rich strangers with security convoys at midnight. But the freezing wind cut through Lily's coat again, and Margaret started coughing harder beside us. I looked down the empty Brooklyn street toward my apartment building 3 blocks away. Broken heater. Empty refrigerator. Final eviction notice sitting on the kitchen counter beneath unpaid electric bills. Then I looked back at the heated SUV waiting with golden light glowing through tinted windows. Motherhood makes pride feel smaller sometimes. Ethan opened the rear passenger door himself. Warm air spilled into the freezing night instantly carrying the faint scent of leather and cedar. Arthur helped Margaret inside carefully while I hesitated beside the curb. Mommy? Lily whispered. I swallowed hard and climbed in after them. The door shut with a heavy click that sounded strangely final. Inside felt like another world. Soft lighting. Cream leather seats. Heated air warming my frozen hands almost painfully fast. Lily stared wide-eyed at the tiny television screens built into the headrests like she had just entered a spaceship. Ethan slid into the seat across from us without a word while one of the drivers pulled smoothly away from the curb. Rain streaked across the dark windows as Brooklyn disappeared. Behind us in silver reflections and traffic lights. Nobody spoke for nearly a full minute. Then Margaret reached toward the paper bag still sitting in my lap. May I? She asked gently. I nodded. She opened the bag carefully and smiled the second she saw the grilled cheese sandwiches wrapped in foil. Arthur loves grilled cheese, she said softly. Arthur looked embarrassed instantly. Margaret. What? She teased quietly. You do. Lily giggled beside me. The sound felt strange inside that tense silence. Ethan watched the interaction carefully without saying anything. But I noticed it then. The tiny shift in his posture whenever his mother smiled. Like some invisible weight loosened for half a second before settling back again. Margaret handed half the sandwich toward Ethan. You should eat too. He barely glanced at it. I ate earlier. Arthur snorted softly beside him. Coffee does not count as dinner. Ethan finally leaned back against the seat with visible irritation. Father. What? Arthur replied calmly. You think I do not notice? You have not sat through a meal with us in weeks. The temperature inside the SUV seemed to drop instantly despite the heat. Ethan looked out the window toward the blurred Manhattan skyline ahead. Jaw tight. Silent. And suddenly I understood something dangerous. The most feared man in this city was not angry tonight because his parents disappeared. He was angry because they left him. Margaret broke the silence first by taking the sandwich from my lap and placing it directly into Ethan's hand. "Eat," she said softly. For a moment he stared at the warm foil wrapper like he had forgotten what ordinary kindness felt like. Then his gray eyes lifted slowly toward me. And for the first time since we met, the coldness in them cracked just enough for me to glimpse the lonely man buried underneath all that power. Money has a smell. I realized that the second the SUV rolled through iron gates taller than my apartment building and stopped beneath lights bright enough to turn midnight into daylight. The estate looked less like a home and more like the kind of place politicians deny owning on television. Stone walls. Massive fountains. Darkened by rain. Security cameras tucked into corners like silent eyes watching everything. Lily pressed her nose against the window. "Mommy," she whispered breathlessly. "Is this a castle?" I almost said yes. Ethan stepped out first while another man hurried forward with an umbrella, but Ethan ignored it completely. Rain dampened his hair as he opened the door for Margaret instead. Not a bodyguard. Not a servant. Himself. That detail stayed with me. Powerful men usually forget how to do simple things for the people they love. Inside, the mansion felt unnaturally quiet. Marble floors reflected golden chandelier light while massive paintings lined the walls like ghosts from another century. Everything looked expensive enough to belong in a museum, yet nothing felt warm. Not really. The air smelled faintly of cedarwood and old books, but underneath that lived something colder. Loneliness maybe. Lily tightened her grip on my hand as we stepped carefully across the polished floor. Our wet discount store shoes squeaked embarrassingly loud in the silence. I suddenly became painfully aware of my faded jeans, my diner uniform beneath my coat, the exhaustion sitting under my eyes. A woman in her 50s appeared from the hallway wearing an elegant navy dress. Relief flooded her face the second she saw Margaret. "Mrs. Blackwood." Then her eyes shifted toward Ethan. Fear replaced the relief immediately. Tiny. Almost invisible. But I saw it. Ethan noticed too. "Olivia," he said calmly. "Prepare the East guest suite." The woman nodded quickly and disappeared without another word. Arthur loosened his scarf slowly while looking around the mansion with visible annoyance. "Too warm again," he muttered. "Feels like a hotel lobby." Ethan rubbed his forehead once like this conversation had happened 100 times before. "The heat is set at 72 degrees. "Exactly," Arthur replied. "Nobody sleeps well in 72 degrees. Margaret smiled softly beside him. "Your father opens windows in January." Lily giggled again. Somehow she had already stopped being afraid. Children always sense hearts before reputations. Ethan finally looked toward me. "You and Lily can stay. Tonight." I blinked in surprise. "That is not necessary. Your neighborhood floods during storms," he said evenly. "Half the power grid there already failed tonight." My stomach tightened because he was probably right. The old wiring in our building shut down every time heavy rain hit Brooklyn. Ethan studied my expression carefully before adding quietly, "This is not charity, Clara. It is caution." I crossed my arms instinctively. "You still think I am dangerous?" His eyes held mine for a long second. "I think people are unpredictable when survival is involved." That sentence landed harder than he probably intended. Because survival had shaped every decision I made for years. Before I could answer, Margaret gently touched my arm. "Please stay," she said softly. "I would like to thank you properly." Her voice carried genuine warmth. The kind that cannot be faked. I looked down at Lily, already staring in awe at the giant staircase curving toward the second floor like something from a movie. Then I looked back at Ethan. Rain tapped steadily against the tall windows behind him while shadows from chandelier light moved softly across his face. He still looked intimidating. Still dangerous. But underneath all that control sat exhaustion so deep it almost hurt to look at directly. "One night," I said quietly. Ethan nodded once. "Businesslike. Controlled again." But just before he turned away, Lily tugged gently on the sleeve of his coat. "Your mommy likes grilled cheese too," she informed him seriously. The corner of Arthur's mouth twitched instantly. Margaret covered a smile with her hand. And Ethan Blackwood, the man whose silence terrified entire rooms, stood completely motionless like nobody in years had spoken to him without fear until a 6-year-old little girl decided not to. Some houses are so large they stop feeling like homes. That thought stayed in my head as I stood inside the guest suite bathroom staring at my reflection beneath soft golden lights brighter than anything in my apartment. The mirror showed a tired 29-year-old waitress with rain-frizzy brown hair, smudged mascara, and a diner uniform hidden beneath a borrowed cashmere robe that probably cost more than my monthly rent. I barely recognized myself standing there. Lily had fallen asleep almost instantly 20 minutes earlier after discovering the guest bed was softer than marshmallows and clouds mixed together. She was sprawled across the enormous mattress hugging one of the decorative pillows like treasure. I should have slept too. My entire body ached from exhaustion. But something about this mansion kept me awake. Maybe it was the silence. Rich people have different silence than poor people. Poor silence sounds anxious. Pipes rattling. Neighbors arguing through thin walls. Bills sitting unopened on kitchen counters. But wealthy silence feels controlled. Intentional. Like even the air has rules. I stepped quietly into the hallway, careful not to wake Lily. The mansion had dimmed for the night now, chandeliers softened to amber glows reflecting across marble floors. Somewhere far away a grandfather clock chimed 2 in the morning. I followed the sound of quiet voices drifting from downstairs until I reached the kitchen. The room looked larger than the entire first floor of my apartment building. Stainless steel appliances gleamed beneath pendant lights while fresh flowers sat perfectly arranged on a massive stone island. But what caught my attention was Ethan standing alone near the coffee machine wearing a black dress shirt with the sleeves rolled to his forearms. No jacket. No guards. Just exhaustion carved into every line of his face. He looked up immediately when he noticed me. Alert in half a second. Like rest never fully reached him anymore. "You should be sleeping," he said calmly. I crossed my arms lightly against the cold marble countertop. "I could say the same thing to you." A faint shadow of amusement touched his expression before disappearing. He poured black coffee into a mug without asking if I wanted any. Then paused. "Tea." The simple offer caught me off guard. "Chamomile if you have it." He opened a cabinet immediately without hesitation. Organized. Precise. Like he knew exactly where everything belonged in this giant empty house. "Your daughter likes you very much," I said quietly while he heated water. Ethan leaned. One hand against the counter. "Children usually avoid me." "Children avoid tension," I corrected softly. "Not people." His eyes lifted toward mine then. Sharp. Curious. "And what tension do you think she noticed?" I hesitated because honesty felt dangerous around powerful men. But lying felt worse. "You barely breathe in this house." Silence settled between us while steam curled softly from the kettle. Outside the massive windows rain continued falling over Manhattan in silver streaks. Ethan finally looked down at the countertop. "My father hates this place," he admitted quietly. The confession surprised me more than the words themselves. Powerful men rarely explain themselves. "Then why does he stay?" I asked. Ethan gave a humorless smile. "Because my enemies know where he lives." The sentence landed heavy in the quiet kitchen. Suddenly the security outside made more sense. The cameras. The guards. The locked gates. Protection and prison often look identical from the outside. Ethan slid the mug of tea toward me carefully. His fingers brushed mine for half a second. Warm. Steady. Human. They disappeared tonight because my mother wanted to walk through Brooklyn like she used to when they were younger, he said. No security. No drivers. No schedules. I wrapped both hands around the warm mug. And? His jaw tightened slightly. My security team lost them for almost 6 hours. There it was again. Not anger. Fear disguised as control. I studied the man standing across from me beneath soft kitchen lights. The feared businessman whose name probably terrified half the city looked less dangerous at 2 in the morning. Just tired. Lonely. Buried beneath responsibilities too heavy for one person to carry forever. Then his phone buzzed sharply against the counter. Ethan glanced at the screen once and the softness disappeared instantly. Every muscle in his body hardened again like armor sliding back into place. What is it? He asked coldly into the phone. Silence. Then his expression darkened. How long ago? Another pause. His gray eyes shifted slowly toward me. Do not touch anything until I get there, he said quietly before ending the call. The room suddenly felt colder. What happened? I asked carefully. Ethan stared at me for one long unreadable second before answering. Someone entered your apartment tonight. The world can change in one sentence. 1 second I was standing barefoot in a billionaire's kitchen holding chamomile tea. The next, every nerve in my body turned to ice. What do you mean someone entered my apartment? My voice came out thinner than I intended. Ethan grabbed his coat from the chair without answering immediately. Controlled movements. Calm face. But I noticed how fast he moved now. Like danger had suddenly become personal. One of my security teams monitors the surrounding blocks when my parents leave the estate, he explained while buttoning his sleeves. They saw 2 men force entry into your building 20 minutes ago. My stomach dropped hard enough to make me dizzy. Lily's medicine. The words escaped before I could stop them. Ethan looked up instantly. What? Her asthma inhaler is inside. Fear climbed into my chest so fast I could barely breathe myself. Winter always made Lily's asthma worse. Her backup inhaler sat in the apartment kitchen drawer because I could not afford a second prescription refill until Friday. Ethan watched panic spread across my face for half a second before stepping closer. Clara. His voice lowered. Steady. Look at me. I did. Barely. Your daughter is safe upstairs. Something about the way he said it made my pulse slow slightly. Not because the danger disappeared. Because he sounded absolutely certain nothing would happen to her while she was here. Powerful men spend their lives making promises. But certainty feels different when it comes from someone used to being obeyed. Ethan grabbed his phone again. Prepare the car, he ordered quietly. And send Damon inside now. Less than 30 seconds later another man entered the kitchen. Taller than Ethan. Broad shoulders beneath a dark suit. A scar ran along his jawline, pale against olive skin. His expression shifted the second he noticed me standing there. Calculating. This is Damon Reyes, Ethan said. Head of security. Damon nodded once toward me before speaking directly to Ethan. The apartment door was forced open. Neighbors reported hearing movement inside about 15 minutes before the team arrived. My throat tightened painfully. Was anything taken? Damon hesitated. Tiny. But enough for Ethan to notice instantly. What? Ethan asked coldly. Damon's eyes flicked toward me again. There were photographs on the kitchen table. Confusion cut through the panic. Photographs? Damon reached into his coat slowly and removed a clear evidence bag. Inside sat one picture. Me leaving Romano's diner earlier that evening holding Lily's hand. The image looked grainy and distant, like it had been taken from across the street. Ice flooded my veins. I do not understand. Ethan took the bag from Damon carefully, studying the photo with unreadable eyes. Someone was watching you before tonight. The kitchen suddenly felt too bright. Too quiet. I tried forcing my thoughts into order, but fear scattered everything. Why would anyone watch me? Damon and Ethan exchanged a look that lasted barely a second. Enough to tell me there was already an answer neither of them liked. Ethan placed the evidence bag onto the counter gently. Too gently. Because you helped my parents tonight. That does not make sense. It does in my world. Silence settled heavily between us while rain battered the tall windows harder outside. Somewhere upstairs Lily was sleeping peacefully in a bed bigger than our entire living room, completely unaware that strangers had entered the only home she had ever known. My knees suddenly felt weak. Ethan noticed immediately. He reached for my arm instinctively, steadying me before I could stumble backward against the counter. Warm hand. Firm grip. Protective without hesitation. I looked up at him in shock. Not because he touched me. Because his face changed the second he realized I was afraid. The cold businessman vanished for one unguarded moment, replaced by something sharper. Personal. Dangerous in an entirely different way. Nobody touches what is under my protection, Ethan said quietly. The words should have terrified me. Instead they wrapped around the panic clawing inside my chest like armor. Damon cleared his throat softly beside us. There is something else, he said carefully. Ethan did not release my arm. Say it. Damon exhaled once. The men inside her apartment were not searching for valuables. The kitchen went silent again. Then what were they looking for? I whispered. Damon's expression hardened slightly as his eyes shifted toward the photograph on the counter. You. Fear changes the sound of a room. After Damon said that single word, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Even the rain outside seemed quieter somehow. You. I stared at the photograph lying on the marble counter while my pulse hammered painfully against my ribs. Grainy image. Me holding Lily's hand outside Romano's diner only hours earlier. My ordinary life suddenly looked like evidence in someone else's nightmare. This is insane, I whispered. I work double shifts at a diner. I drive a 10-year-old Honda with a broken heater. Nobody is hunting me. Ethan finally released my arm slowly, but the warmth from his hand lingered against my skin. People do not always choose targets because they matter, he said quietly. Sometimes they choose them because they matter to someone else. My stomach twisted hard. Your parents. Ethan did not answer. He did not need to. Damon stepped closer to the counter, lowering his voice. The timing is too precise. Your interaction with Mr. and Mrs. Blackwood happened less than 2 hours before the break-in. I shook my head immediately. Then someone followed us from the street. Ethan's expression darkened slightly. Exactly. Silence crashed down again. I wrapped both arms around myself, suddenly freezing despite the warmth inside the mansion. Because now every detail from tonight replayed differently inside my head. The empty street. The black SUVs. The way Arthur kept glancing behind him beneath the pharmacy awning. They were not simply lost. They were hiding. Ethan looked toward Damon. Where are the men now? Gone before our team arrived, Damon replied. But the apartment was searched carefully. Drawers opened. Closets checked. Your daughter's room too. My breath caught painfully. Lily's room. Tiny pink blankets from Walmart. Her stuffed rabbit missing one button eye. Crayon drawings taped beside the window because we could not afford framed decorations. Strangers had walked through that space tonight. Ethan noticed the panic returning instantly. Clara. His voice softened just enough to steady me again. They did not touch anything personal. How do you know? I asked. Ethan held my gaze without hesitation. Because if they wanted to scare you, they would have. The certainty in his tone terrified me more than the words themselves. This was not a man guessing. This was a man who understood exactly how dangerous people think. Arthur suddenly appeared in the kitchen doorway wearing gray pajama pants and an expensive wool robe. Margaret stood behind him clutching the railing with concern written all over her face. What happened? Arthur asked immediately. Ethan's jaw tightened. Nothing you need to worry about. Arthur snorted softly. You have used that sentence since you were 16. It usually means something terrible. Margaret's eyes landed on my face next. Clara? I tried forcing a smile for her sake, but it failed instantly. Ethan answered before I could. Someone broke into her apartment. The silence that followed felt heavier than before. Margaret covered her mouth softly. Arthur's face hardened in a way I had not seen yet from the older man. Not fear. Anger. Because of us? Ethan did not respond immediately. That was answer enough. Margaret slowly sat down at the kitchen table like her knees suddenly weakened beneath her. Oh God! Guilt hit me unexpectedly then. Sharp and immediate. Because this family looked exhausted long before I met them tonight. Like fear had already lived inside this house for years. I took a slow breath. Lily and I can leave in the morning, I said quietly. Ethan's head turned toward me instantly. No. The word came too fast. Too firm. Damon glanced sideways at him briefly before looking away again. I noticed. Ethan noticed that I noticed. You staying here creates more danger for your family, I continued carefully. Ethan stepped closer again until only the kitchen island separated us. Listen to me very carefully, Clara. His gray eyes locked onto mine with terrifying intensity. The second someone entered your apartment looking for you, leaving this estate stopped being an option. My heartbeat stumbled. Not because he sounded controlling. Because for the first time all night, Ethan Blackwood sounded afraid. The most dangerous thing about powerful men is not their enemies. It is how quickly they start believing they can protect everything alone. Ethan stood across from me in the kitchen with tension carved into every line of his body while rain hammered against the windows hard enough to shake the glass. Margaret still sat silently at the table clutching her robe closed with trembling fingers. Arthur stared toward the floor like he was replaying every bad decision that brought his family to this moment. And somehow, without meaning to, I had been pulled directly into the center of it. This is my fault, Margaret whispered suddenly. Ethan's head snapped toward her immediately. No. You wanted us to stay home tonight, she continued softly. We left anyway. Mother. And now this young woman and her child are involved because I wanted to feel normal for one evening. Her voice cracked slightly on the last word. Something inside me twisted painfully at the sound. Because she did not look like the wife of some untouchable billionaire. She looked like a tired mother watching fear consume her son piece by piece. Arthur finally exhaled heavily through his nose. Enough. Everyone looked toward him. The older man pushed himself upright slowly from the chair before facing Ethan directly. Tell her the truth. The room went completely still. Ethan's expression hardened instantly. This is not the time. Then when? Arthur fired back quietly. After another innocent person gets dragged into this family. Ethan looked away first. Tiny movement. But I noticed it. So did Margaret. So did Damon standing silently near the doorway. Nobody in this house challenged Ethan Blackwood easily. Except apparently his father. Arthur rubbed one tired hand across his face. You think keeping everyone in the dark protects them, he said. It does not. It isolates them. Ethan's jaw tightened dangerously. Father. No. Arthur stepped closer now, old anger simmering beneath his exhaustion. You built walls around this family so high that your mother had to sneak out of her own home just to buy coffee from a street cart. Silence crashed through the kitchen again. I slowly looked toward Ethan. His face remained controlled, but his eyes gave him away. Hurt. Not rage. Hurt. Margaret stood carefully from the table and touched Ethan's arm gently. Arthur does not mean to attack you. Ethan laughed once under his breath. Empty sound. That is exactly what he means. Arthur folded his arms. I mean you are lonely, son. The words hit harder than shouting ever could have. Ethan stared at his father without blinking while thunder rolled softly outside over Manhattan. Then he looked toward me unexpectedly. My father thinks I ruined this family. Ethan, Margaret whispered. But he kept going anyway. 3 years ago there was an attempt to reach me through them. His voice stayed calm. Too calm. The kind of calm people use when discussing memories that still bleed underneath. After that, I increased security. Restricted travel. Limited outside contact. I glanced around the massive mansion again, suddenly understanding why everything felt cold here. Safe did not always mean alive. You turned this house into a fortress, Arthur said quietly. Ethan met his father's eyes directly. And you are still breathing because of it. Arthur did not answer. Because what do you say to someone who sacrificed his own peace of mind to keep you alive? My chest tightened unexpectedly. For the first time all night, I stopped seeing Ethan as some untouchable powerful man. I saw a son drowning beneath responsibility so heavy he forgot how to live underneath it. Then Lily's sleepy voice drifted softly from the kitchen doorway. Mommy? Every adult in the room turned instantly. She stood there rubbing one eye, her blonde hair messy against her cheeks while clutching the stuffed rabbit Olivia must have found for her upstairs. I had a bad dream, she whispered. Before I could move, Ethan crossed the kitchen first. Fast. Instinctive. He crouched slightly in front of her, his entire expression changing in seconds. Softer now. Careful. You are safe here, he told her. Quietly. Lily looked at him for one long moment before asking the question nobody else in the room was brave enough to say out loud. Then why do you look scared? Children ask questions adults spend entire lives avoiding. The kitchen fell completely silent after Lily spoke. Ethan stayed crouched in front of her beneath the warm pendant lights while rain whispered softly against the windows behind him. For one strange suspended moment, nobody in the room looked away. Not Arthur. Not Margaret. Not Damon. Me least of all. Because Lily had asked the one thing nobody here dared say aloud. Ethan Blackwood looked afraid. Lily shifted sleepily beside him, clutching the stuffed rabbit tighter against her chest. Did someone hurt you? She asked softly. Ethan blinked once like the question physically caught him off guard. Then something almost painful crossed his face. No, he answered quietly. Lily tilted her head. Then why are your eyes sad? Arthur looked down immediately. Margaret covered her mouth again. Even Damon turned slightly toward the window to hide whatever reaction crossed his expression. But Ethan stayed perfectly still. I realized then that this man probably faced politicians, rivals, lawyers, reporters, and dangerous people every single day without hesitation. Yet one tired 6-year-old girl in bunny slippers had managed to undo him in less than 30 seconds. Lily stepped closer and touched his sleeve carefully with tiny fingers. Mommy says people get quiet when they are carrying too much heavy stuff inside. My chest tightened instantly because I had said that to her after she asked why I cried sometimes in the shower when I thought she was asleep. Ethan slowly looked toward me then. Not cold this time. Not guarded. Just tired in a way that reached all the way down to his bones. Your daughter is very observant, he said quietly. I gave a small helpless smile. She notices everything. Lily yawned dramatically before climbing into my arms without warning. I held her against my chest automatically while she rested her head on my shoulder. Half asleep already. Children trust safety faster than adults ever can. Ethan rose slowly to his feet again, but something about him looked different now. Softer around the edges maybe. Like Lily's honesty cracked open a door he spent years keeping locked. Margaret approached carefully and brushed her hand against Ethan's cheek the way mothers do even when their sons become powerful enough to frighten entire rooms. You do not have to carry all of this alone anymore, she whispered. Ethan closed his eyes briefly at her touch. 1 second. Maybe 2. Then the armor slid back into place again. Not fully this time. But enough. His phone buzzed once more against the marble counter. Damon picked it up first, scanning the message quickly before looking toward Ethan. The team finished searching the apartment building security footage. Ethan's expression sharpened instantly. And? Damon hesitated slightly. One of the men was identified. The kitchen tensed again immediately. Ethan stepped closer. Who? Damon lowered his voice carefully. Someone connected to Victor Moretti's organization. Arthur muttered something under his breath that sounded exhausted more than surprised. My confusion returned immediately. Who is Victor Moretti? Nobody answered fast enough. Which told me everything. Ethan rubbed one hand slowly across his jaw before finally looking at me. A man who believes every kindness has a price attached to it. And what does that have to do with me? Ethan held my gaze steadily. He will assume you approached my parents on purpose. The realization settled slowly like ice water spreading through my chest. In Ethan's world, kindness looked suspicious. Compassion looked strategic. Feeding 2 hungry elderly people could become something dangerous simply because powerful men no longer believed goodness existed without hidden motives. Lily stirred sleepily against my shoulder. That is dumb, she mumbled with childlike honesty. Silence followed for half a second before Arthur unexpectedly laughed. Real laughter this time. Rough and warm and alive. Margaret smiled through tears instantly. Even Damon looked away to hide amusement. Ethan stared at Lily for one long moment before the smallest smile I had ever seen touched the corner of his mouth. Tiny. Barely there. But real. Yeah, he said softly. It is. Then his gray eyes lifted back toward me beneath the soft kitchen lights while thunder rolled far away over the city. Which means whoever sent those men tonight made one very serious mistake. I swallowed carefully. What mistake? Ethan's expression darkened again, but not with fear this time. Protection. Absolute and terrifying. They reminded me what kind people look like, he said quietly. And now I am not letting you disappear from my life.